Thank you so much for tuning into the show, and welcome to Season 2 of the Audiobook Club with John York. The Audiobook Club, partnered with Pro Audio Voices, celebrates audiobooks, the amazing people and teams who make them happen, as well as the various talents behind storytelling. To learn more about Amplify and other opportunities to grow your sales, platform, and audience, head over to proaudiovoices.com and listen out for a short but informational advertisement within this episode. Let's start the show. Hello and welcome to the Audiobook Club. In this week's episode, we're so lucky to be joined by audiobook narrator Paige Reisenfeld. Paige, it's so lovely to have you join us on the show. How are you today?
I am doing well. It's awesome to be here. So
I really appreciate you coming on the show. So I know, just like we were saying just before we started recording, you've been doing a few podcasts recently. So I do really appreciate you taking the time to join this one. Do you enjoy the podcast format? Do you like being interviewed?
yes and no. I always feel I like being interviewed, but I will talk forever. So I always feel like people don't actually like to listen to me. They interview. So it's one of those like, okay, stop talking, Paige, stop talking.
Well, we're very interested to hear what you've got to say. Don't worry about that.
You.
So as is tradition on the show, and I hope you're not getting bored of this question already, I'd love to start by asking how you first began your journey in this, crazy world of audiobook narration.
Yeah, well, it goes all the way back to kindergarten. I was voted best reader. No, I'm just teasing, but I was voted best reader in kindergarten. But the real journey, I was listening. I did children's theater. I was a classical voice major, and then I did children's theater. And then, the pandemic happened, and there was no theater. So I started delivery driving for Amazon and also them working in their warehouse. And in order to not go insane, I was listening originally to podcasts and then switched to audiobooks. And then I went up and to see my dad, who lives about an hour north of me. And we were talking about audiobooks. I don't even know how it came up, but it turned out he and I were listening to the same audiobook, something in the Helldiver series narrated by R.C. Bray. And so we got to talking about narrators. And then he was like, I think you would actually be a really great narrator. And I was like, oh, that's a thought. So I looked into it and signed up for training, and here I am.
That's great. So, what was it like about audiobooks, like as a medium specifically, that kind of captured you as a performer? Like, did you take a look as you were listening to these audiobooks? Were you kind of sort of maybe even subconsciously thinking, doing all these voices may be really fun. It may be great to be sort of immersed in, storytelling for a living, that kind of thing. Like, what was it about audiobooks that really captured you as a performer?
I think it's all of that. As a stage performer, you're like, this is my part and this is what I do. And something about audiobooks, when you can play all the parts, is it's basically it's a one woman or one man show, right? And that's what audiobooks are. Just you don't have to look at me while I do it. And then it's a fantastic place to use accents or even to be perhaps not as over the top as like animation voiceover, which don't get me wrong, I would love to do that too. But part of why I love theater so much is the storytelling, is presenting stories to people who might not otherwise be exposed to them or offering a differing point of view. And I feel like books can do that,
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Have you always been interested in performing, like from that very young age? Like, was there anything sort of else on the cards for you as this is really what I want to do?
I have trouble with commitment. No. Yeah, so I started I did ballet for a while, and then I did like jazz. I was like, I'm going to dance. I didn't start singing until loving singing, I should say. It's like, I could do this, until I was in like 5th grade, 6th grade. And then I did like drama in high school. And then I was not accepted into a music program for my first time through college, so it kind of fell by the wayside. And then I had an opportunity to sing with Eric Whitacre at Carnegie Hall. I auditioned and I got in, and I was like, oh, this is amazing. And there were 400 of us in this choir on stage, and it was electric. Like, I can't even describe the feeling of being on there. And it wasn't even like stage. We were literally just standing there with our music, but just this feeling in the air was so amazing. All these people coming together to sing this story. And I went back to school for music. But in there in like 5th grade, 6th grade, I thought for sure I was going to be an architect and interior designer and decorator and own my own firm. And then I realized that's a lot of math, and I don't like math. Like, there was astronomy for a while, but again, with the math, like,
Yeah.
Yeah, and I did clothing for a while, like cosplay and sewing and that. So yeah, but this one feels right. I don't
Mm.
find myself looking for something else after finding audiobooks.
Yeah. Okay. So when you first started narrating those early books, like what? Because once you, I mean, listening to audiobooks is one thing, but then when you get behind the mic and then you go and start narrating one yourself, it's a very different process. Very. I found it incredibly different to how I thought I would find it. Envisioning that. What was like the most challenging thing about narrating audiobooks? Do you think you came across when first starting out on those early books?
Besides my neighborhood, which is still a problem, the noise in the neighborhood. Um, Sometimes the words don't come out the way you mean them to. And you're like, what did I just say? And then also, because I was editing my stuff first, getting over that perfectionism
Mm.
thing where like, I know I can say this better. I know I can say this better. I can always say this better. It's never going to be perfect. So having to
Mm.
get past that and be like, it is good and it is good enough. And I don't
Mm.
mean to say good enough by like, oh, fine, it's passable. I mean, like, it is good enough. And because there will never be a perfect, you kind of have to move on. And that's very, very hard for me to get past. So
Yeah.
still.
Yeah, you mentioned perfectionism there, and am I right in saying that you with corrections, you with pickups, you have very little pickups, if any, on most, and I find this mind blowing because I make I don't want to tell you how many pickups that I get, but it's not it's very far away from none at all. So like I wonder like how like with your like is that a part of being a perfectionist then you proof and proof and proof or you make sure that everything is as clean as possible.
So I actually don't proof my work anymore. And while I would love to say I've continued that trend, that is not the case. I have gotten like, 20 to 30 pickups back in my last few books.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I do try and be cognizant of what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of my pickups are because I have like a tiny, tiny bit of dyslexia where I will switch word order.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of saying like we both, or can't think of something like just around, I'll say around just or something like that. Like it's
Yeah.
just like the flipping of two words. Um, and yes, I would absolutely fix that if I went back and did it.
Yeah.
But then, then there are some times where I'm like, I don't know what happened, but yay. So, but it's definitely like looking at it and being like, that's not right. That's not what I said. And having that like eye ear juxtaposition is not the word I'm looking for, but it's the only one coming to mind. Being able to realize that I made a mistake
Yeah.
is something that I try and do because like doing pickups later is not nearly as fun as being in the moment because then you're like, where was I?
Yeah, absolutely. I
So,
always find that I most like it gets worse. Like the more I get into a book and the more I sort of immerse myself, and you get into that state of flow. And I like maybe even subconsciously think I'm nailing this. This is the best read I've done, and then it comes back and I've made way more mistakes. And when I'm actually just aware of what I'm doing, totally, it's kind of strange in that way. I think.
absolutely. I mean, because you're like, I'm this character, and maybe in this moment you said minute instead of moment, and maybe the character would, but that's not what the author wrote. And you're like,
Yeah.
oh, well, okay. It is what it is. I mean, and that's different from stage too, because like, yeah, you flubbed the line on stage, but now you're done and you're past it. Get it right next time.
Yeah.
So there's no going back.
No, exactly. One of the joys of course narrating fiction is all of the characters that you come across, being able to inhabit characters, especially in those books where you get to be a character for an entire chapter. Um, and I just sort of wonder. I always like to ask this question about character traits, personality traits of characters. What are some of your favorite personality traits that a character can have that you think, oh, this is going to be fun. This is going to be a good read.
The person who says everything they're thinking, because you rarely find that in real life. So to do that, the house, as it were, of the
Yeah,
book, who's just like, I'm just saying this, and who cares what they think of me? That's always fun because it's
yeah.
so just out there. Villains that are like
Mm.
actually kind of like morally gray or have like redemption arcs, or maybe they're not really the villain, like that kind of
Mm.
that back and forth. I love the dichotomy. Yeah, I also like playing opposites, and usually people come back and they're like, "No, that's not right," and I'm like, "Darn it!" Like I want the sunshine to have a voice down here talking like this, and then like the really grumpy person to have this really high pitched voice, and people are like, "Doesn't work." I'm like, "I will make it work sometime," but Usually it doesn't work. Usually they send it back and I'm like, no, no.
Yeah. When creating those characters, when like, assigning voices and things, where where does that come from for you? Does it, do you have anything that you like to draw upon? Like how much of that is decided just by sort of feel, or like, ingrained in the text? How does that sort of process look for you?
Um, Definitely text clues. I mean, if they tell me that someone's got a low, sultry voice, I obviously can't give them something bubbly and high pitched. But a lot of time it is just feel. And sometimes I'm wrong. Like my very first book, I signed stuff during prep, and then I flipped their voices when it came out of my mouth when I was recording, and I was like, well, that's just the way it is. Now these two sound like this. And there wasn't anything in the text to say otherwise.
Yeah.
But personality, a lot of times the authors have written in a cadence that just kind of
Hmm.
clicks in my brain as like, this is how it's supposed to sound. I was talking with another narrator on a video she was doing where I'm like, don't you hate it when authors wrote in an accent and they didn't tell you? Like, it's right there. It would be so easily shifted into Southern or something like that because of how they wrote it. So sometimes that, and I'll ask, I'm like, does this person have an accent? Can they have an accent because that's how you wrote it? Or
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Yeah, accents again are another huge part of this job. Accents come up, and occasionally I know I looked on your website and you have a long list of accents that you're comfortable with. You narrate it; it's really impressive.
Thank
But
you.
when an accent comes across, or maybe back in the day before you added that specific one to the list, how did you approach when approaching a new accent, one that perhaps you're not that comfortable with straight away? What does your process look like about getting one down, for a catch with a couple of lines? Like could you just tell us a little bit about like the research, the sort of practice and things that all go into to getting down a new accent?
Yeah. So a lot of it is just listening. It's ear work. Um, a kind of a little bit of, immersion. Like if I want to sound like someone from Downton Abbey, I'm gonna go listen, watch a lot of Downton Abbey because I mimic. And so
Mm,
I will watch something and then I will just start talking like that.
mm,
I just had to do a Minnesota one. I'm like, well, I guess it's time to binge Fargo. Like, and I know that Fargo's not in Minnesota, but still, that was the sound that like she wanted. But
yeah.
in terms of actual like research, there's the International Dialects Archive. I
Mm,
will spend hours on there listening to like different parts of the world. There's the GMU Accents website, which their search function is like down right now. But if you Google search what you're looking for, usually they
mm,
have something. And they also break it down via the International Phonetic Alphabet. So I can and they'll like talk about where the vowel shifts and I can read that because I was a voice major. So I'm like, oh, this is very helpful. I can see what they're doing with the consonants and the vowels and how those shift. And then there's also an amazing, very expensive textbook that's the dialects of the United States of America. And it has it broken down by map, by like phase one or the first vowel shift and then the second vowel shift and the third vowel shift. And there are random cities in the middle of this region that doesn't do this one thing. And I was talking to Ali Shea, who I know you've talked to her, and she's lovely, where she was talking about accuracy versus intelligibility and how
mm,
sometimes you have to sacrifice that accuracy in order to be intelligible to the majority of the population.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's very hard for me because it's actually harder to do a light accent than it is to do a heavy accent because you have to have it
Yes.
mastered to then take it back to just a hint. Like that kind of mastery, like that's aspirational. So
Yes, I'm so pleased you said that. Do you know, I've never spoken to somebody about that before, but I feel exactly the same way. It is 10 times harder to do a light version of an accent to the point where I really struggle, and I just think,
Mhm.
can't I just do it? Can't I just give it
Yeah,
the full
yeah,
gung ho?
exactly. Or you'll just suddenly start speaking in a full one. You're like, no, I gotta go back and just do the southern with just a little bit of an ah instead of an I. Like
Yeah.
just little things. So that's the other thing too, is I will make a list for a character. I'm like, what aspects of this accent am I going to abide by? I will probably take the most common one or two vowel shifts, or dropping the G on an ing word for the South is generally pretty common.
Yeah.
So just deciding which of those attributes you want to apply that you can maintain as well and having like a little post-it note that's like, this is what I'm doing here, here, and here. So
Have you gotten pretty good then at being able to spot where someone's from pretty quickly?
Like just by listening to them.
Yeah.
Sometimes I wouldn't say like I could be like, John, you're from the United Kingdom there, but or like you're American. But then sometimes
Yeah.
like I will struggle with some of the romantic languages, or like if it is a Slavic language, I can usually tell it's got Slavic roots, but I could not necessarily tell you if it was from Croatia
Yeah.
or, Bosnia, Herzegovina, unless I heard them speaking in their actual language.
Mm.
And then I'm like, oh, okay, because then I understand where there are different letters. And I have a Russian minor, so I'm like, okay, I know that's not Russian or that is Russian. So so I can eliminate that. But yeah, I can
Yeah.
regionally sometimes.
Yeah. Okay.
Sometimes. I will not say I'm an expert on being like, oh, you're from here. Like those videos where they're like, he listens and he's like, oh yeah, you're from, but I'm like, that's insane to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm very much the same. I was having a bit of a laugh with another narrator who, because obviously we do get pretty sort of into learn. When we're learning about accents, some things stick. And we were talking about the sort of audiobook narrators' pet peeve of when someone says, "I don't have an accent." Just in general, you hear that quite a lot, and you think, "Ooh, I bet you do."
But you do. But you do. You
So,
do.
yeah, exactly. So I had the pleasure of chatting with you at this year's APAC. Like, how was APAC for you? Like, do you like those like big industry networking events? I know it was like the first one since the pandemic. But how did you sort of find that whole event?
It was fun, but it was also overwhelming. I mean, I'm an introvert. And there were like what, 750 of us there. So
Yeah.
like I liked it more when there were panels and things going on and you could kind of walk through the crowd and stop and talk to people. But some of the mixers, I was like, oh God, there's so many people and we're all screaming at the top of our lungs to be heard. But I mean, overall, yes, like I thought it was very informative. I
Mm.
loved meeting people who I've only ever seen in boxes on the internet, like you, like a bunch of my other like book talk, TikTok narrator friends. Like
Yeah.
they're real people, and that was really really cool.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think it's really awesome that they're going to be doing alternating years, like virtual
Mm.
in 2024, and then because it's also nice to save money. But yeah,
Yeah.
it was a lot. It was a lot. I
Yeah.
definitely was like, I need to come home and sleep for a few days, and then PJ dragged
Right.
me to a book festival. I was like, okay, all right,
Because that's what you need to go hang out with more crowds after
right,
APAC. That's what you do.
right. Yeah, yeah.
It's
He's an
like,
extrovert.
yeah, because I heard from a lot of narrators after who found it, good but overpowering, overwhelming, like you say, especially as the first big event, since the pandemic and stuff. I just kind of wondered, like, have you any advice for those who do find themselves like overwhelmed in those sort of circumstances but still wanting to put themselves out there, still wanting to meet people in the industry? Because it's a question that I get asked to ask guests a lot, from folks who networking doesn't necessarily come naturally to them. They're very much, introverted and stuff, but they still want to go out and meet people and meet new friends, but they find it incredibly intimidating, as I'm sure we can all understand completely. I just kind of wondered if you had any thoughts on that, or what you would do to, and any advice that you would suggest to them.
Um, First of all, I'm really bad at networking. Incredibly bad. I latched on to an extrovert friend and followed them around. So I recommend that. If you can find an extrovert to adopt you, then that's great. The nice thing again about this one is I had already networked a lot online, which is, I think, easier for a lot of us introverts. So I had connections already with people, but for meeting people who are brand new to me, I actually have a very, very difficult time with that. Coming up with something to say, something to break the ice. And people like at APAC, they were like, don't talk about books and publishing, talk about your cat, talk about
Mm.
whatever. So, I mean, talk about your shoes. And, the other thing too is don't be afraid to like take a step out and get your bearings and take a brain break. Like I walked back up to my hotel room on more than one occasion just to be like,
Yeah.
okay, set stuff down and then come back down. Um, when there was the lunch in the hallways, we just made sure to sit by people that we didn't know. And
Yeah.
then kind of inevitably you strike up a conversation because it's just kind of awkward to sit there.
Yeah.
Like, hey, how's your sandwich? Great.
Yeah.
But but you have find things to talk about. Is this your first APAC? What did you do before? Like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But it is hard. I would definitely say that I am not an expert.
So fair. Well, I think like one of the things you mentioned, if you sat next to somebody who's eating your lunch and stuff, and you kind of want to strike up a conversation if it's awkward and stuff, 9 times out of 10, that person is going to be thanking their lucky stars that you said something because they're just sat on their own too. Perhaps a little bit nervous. There was a few occasions where I was sort of in between conversations and it was kind of that awkward sort of thing, and then someone just came up and said something random and I could have hugged them, and I was
Yeah,
like, oh, thank you for making conversation with me.
absolutely. I mean, I wear an orange hat, so people can just comment on my hat, and there's the icebreaker.
Yeah, I was just going to ask actually. So you've created an instantly recognizable image that sets you apart, accompanying your brand with a cool hat. Like, was this like an active decision in your like brand marketing? Because people do know you, like, you're instantly recognizable in a crowd, with your logo, with your name logo, with the hat on it and things, like you attribute that to you. That's like fully yours. Like, was that like an active thing that you came up with, or did it just sort of happen?
Yes. So I work at a vintage shop one day a week, right? And I love hats. I was told once by a costume person that I had a face for hats, and I decided to take it as a compliment.
Yeah.
And um, um, and it just kind of went from there. So I have amassed a collection, and people are always like, "I'm not a hat person." I'm like, "Put one on your head. Voila, you are a hat person." Um, and so that was just became a thing where I would go to work and I would just wear a hat. And then when I was making TikTok videos, I would sometimes be at work or just be out and about wearing a hat. So people started commenting on the hats. And
Yeah.
then, yeah, I guess it just did kind of become a thing. And then when I did the APA like speed dating, the quick pitch,
Yeah.
and I did the coaching, and I mentioned in my pitch that I have like 60 hats. Um, and I was like, I thought about wearing one. And she was like, "Oh yeah, try it." So on the second ride, I like put on a hat. She was like, "Yeah, I love it. Do that." And then I was thinking about it and I was like, I'm gonna wear my orange hat. One, because it was smaller, so I didn't have to worry about hitting like the
Oh yeah. Yeah.
shock mount, because the big fedoras, I'm always like, boom, hit the shock mount on the microphone, which doesn't look great. But like the little one, I'm like, oh, I can do this. And I do actually have like four orange hats, so it really could have been any of them. But that one was right. I don't know. And so, yeah, now I joke, I'm like, I can take this off and I disappear into the crowd, like incognito. Nobody knows who I am. So, but like, it's like on is a beacon and off is like, I'm a spy.
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic idea because you are going to like, I mean, obviously remembered for your fantastic performances, of course, but then like, for people who are meeting you in real life and stuff, I mean, they're not going to forget that, which I think was such a, especially at networking events where, producers are talking to so many people. It's like so great to have like a memorable thing. I'm not sure what other people can, I was thinking about starting wearing an eye patch or something, something
Oh,
to,
yeah,
you know, I'm not sure about,
absolutely. I mean, and I have my cats like in my like kind of comic book full logo as well. And they visit in the booth too. So they are also now a kind of my brand. Like, and I have like a kind, I said that funny. But anyway, they also kind of represent my brand. But I have like a business card holder that also has like a white cat on the front because my two boy cats are white. So like just
yeah.
kind of incorporating everything. But it is easier when it's something that you wear versus something like that you sound like or have on your thing. Or like I
Mm,
know Zora Johnson, like hers is very like 1950s pinup, and she kind of did like these curvy business cards and stuff too. So yeah,
yeah.
it's easier when it's something you can see. Like you can
Yeah.
pick an accessory. It doesn't, I mean, like a necklace, a big necklace, giant earrings, something, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
also want to wear a hat, as long as it's not orange, I'm totally fine. If you want to wear a hat, it just can't be orange.
Yeah. You should copyright that.
I
That's
should.
important.
I should. No, they had those hats at APAC and they were like green and pink and orange. And I was like, oh, no one's gonna recognize. Luckily, they took them off because it was just for that mixer, but I was very affronted for a moment.
One thing that I found at APAC, which it wasn't great for British people, especially if you're trying to give your best self forward, is they had free bars everywhere, and they had like free liquor, and that is moth to a flame for British people, and it's that's a very dangerous thing to do.
Well, it breaks the ice, right? That's another thing, liquid
Yeah.
courage. How do you get
Yeah.
a bunch of introverts to talk to each other?
Yeah, exactly. So I read that one thing you like to do when not in the booth is play cooperative board games. Can you tell us a little about that? Because I think that's great. Because you mentioned that competitiveness, that's not in the question. That's not in the conversation. Can you tell us a little bit about where this cooperative board game, can I say hobby, like interest?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Both of those will work. Um, yeah, I have the worst luck in the world. And for one of these board games where we created our own characters, and one of the stats is luck. Mine is 0012 because it is well known that my luck is terrible.
Yeah.
I have really high willpower though to counteract it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like whenever I'm playing something like Phase 10, Monopoly, Settlers of Catan, something will happen and I get so livid because it's luck based and not skill based, and it's just it's not pleasant for anybody. So
Hmm.
it's just better if I don't play those games. So now I have a massive collection of cooperative board games. And actually, my partner, PJ, and one of our first dates was going to a board game shop that's here in Richmond and setting up one and playing. And it's called Arkham Horror. And if you've never played it, then basically it's like, how badly do you lose is kind of
Mm.
the goal. Because you're fighting like the ancient ones, right? The
Oh.
ancient horrors, Cthulhu, and all of that. We have but won a couple times, but not often. But that was much more fun because you had to like work together. It's a team effort to beat this other thing,
Hmm.
this outside thing. Or if you've ever played Pandemic, same kind of thing. Just always this like kind of working together and strategy. And I think we have a couple competitive board games, but we played them once.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
fair. That sounds really cool, though.
But yeah, we've spent a lot on cooperative board games. Gloomhaven, Gloomhaven if you like D&D and like you can campaign in it. Yeah, great.
Yeah. That sounds
In our free
fantastic.
time.
Yeah. So what else do you like to get up to when you're not in the booth recording, when you're not working, and not, playing cooperative board games?
I love the mountains. So
Hmm.
if I can go hike in the mountains, we're about an hour and a half drive from the Blue Ridge, which is nice. Um, Although that said, bugs are always trying to kill me. I'm not a huge fan of the outdoors, but like I will garden if it's not, more than 80 degrees Fahrenheit outside, then I might garden.
Yeah.
I have to go do that actually now, not now, but like eventually. But it's 90 degrees outside, and I don't feel like doing that. So our backyard kind of looks like a witch's cottage. Very, very, very terrible.
Yeah.
Like I said, I play with my cats.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm playing Diablo 4 right now.
Oh,
So there's that.
cool.
I love video games.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. Oh, nice. Fantastic.
yeah.
So TikTok, it continues to grow as a space for, narrators to grow and share their samples and projects, etc. How has TikTok changed the narration game for you? Like, have you noticed like a significant impact on business, like since posting regularly?
Um, I would say once I hit 1,000 followers and was able to go live,
Hmm.
um, most of my business now comes from TikTok, from indie
Wow.
authors on TikTok.
Yeah.
I do occasionally audition on ACX and I've started doing some work with publishers, but most of my stuff is from authors on TikTok. And I'm very upfront about my rates.
Yeah.
Um, it's just, yeah, yeah, I've definitely seen an influx too of narrators to the social media world,
Yeah.
especially TikTok, which is both good and bad, right? Like I can't do all the books, but also I kind of want to do that book that so and so just got. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but no, but rising tides and all that. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely, and I also think that it's great because it's opening the eyes of authors
Mm.
to the process and realizing they don't have to spend what companies claim you have to spend, that there are ways to get their books into audio without being with a big five publisher.
Mm.
I think, yeah, it's great. It's great for entrepreneurs. It's great in general. And you make wonderful friendships with it too. But
Mm.
yeah, I wasn't even going to get on it originally. One of my authors was like, Paige, get on TikTok, you'll get work. And I was like, Jen, I'm 30 something years old. I don't need to be on TikTok. Okay. Like, I'm old. And she was like, I'm older than you. Get on TikTok. I was like, fine. And she was right. She was right.
Yeah.
So, like, I'm booked out almost through the end of the year. It was the end of the year, but there was a financial cancellation, which it happens, right?
Yeah.
That's what gig work is. But yeah, I'm booked out almost through the end of the year.
Yeah. That's incredible. So, like, do you talk to your authors before? I mean, I suppose it'll be kind of obvious to them, especially if they found you through TikTok. But do you sort of set out like like an agreement between the two of you, saying, right, I will narrate this live. I will be,
Oh,
posting
I
this is like,
always ask permission,
mm,
always, because they own the copyright.
mhm,
I am providing a service, but yeah,
mhm,
I will not narrate live or clips without written permission from them.
yeah,
Um, because I mean, it's not really Creative Commons use. You see a lot of people using that. I'm like, that's a real fine line, y'all, and I am not gonna play. I'm not gonna do it. I
yeah,
want it written down. And some will be like, I only want you to do through this chapter, or yeah, do the whole book. Like, but most of them have said they've also seen an uptick in sales on their like ebook or physical books when I'm narrating live. So it
oh
turns out to be this
cool,
like mutually beneficial thing.
yeah,
Other listeners and authors can see me perform, and the author I'm working with is gets more promotional material and marketing
yeah.
out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, so with when narrating live, because I've never done it, because I don't yet have 1,000 followers, unfortunately. Cheeky plug if anyone wants to follow me. But the
Well, I will
if
make it a mission.
I would appreciate that, thank you. But yeah, no, the idea of like narrating live, like to me, can seem like a little bit scary, if you will, because like, do you know, because in the booth, the only person who has to hear those mistakes are me, and or if they get passed, then my editor has to hear them, and I don't know, I don't know if I'd be sort of too bothered about, too tell self-conscious at how I look in the camera, that kind of thing. Like, did you sort of go through any of that, or were you always like pretty, like, it was just like being on stage where you think, right, I'm performing now, I'm working, this is what I do, and that's just it.
Oh, I was terrified on stage too. There's always the stage fright leading up to it. And then once I'm on
Yeah,
stage, it's fine. But
yeah,
no, I mean, and there are still days where I'm narrating live and like my headspace just isn't there. And I'm like, I need to not have people looking at me. And that's
mm,
fine. I mean, that's fine. And I'll just, if
yeah,
there are people watching me, because sometimes I don't have anybody watching that I can see. They might be lurking, but maybe I don't see them. I'm just going to be like, hey, I'm going to go for now. So
yeah,
like no one's forcing you, but I will say that everybody, for the most part, there are always trolls, is generally very positive and very
mm,
uplifting. And if I make mistakes, they're seeing the process. They're
mm,
realizing also that those scam videos of like you just sit and talk into your phone in your bed and you don't make any errors and then you get paid $1,000 per fin. And it's like, no, no,
yeah,
that's not what this is. So I think actually watching us make mistakes is, well, one, it can be funny, but two, like also like open again, just kind of opens up everybody's eyes to the whole process. And like if you
yeah,
punch and roll and just, yeah, just they're like, oh, like this is not as easy as people claim it is. So
yeah. Because I must admit, from watching your lives, and you mentioned Ali Shea earlier, watching some of her lives, I found, even though I know the process and I know the experience, just blown away by how great you are. Like, just how, like,
it's intimidating, right? To go
yeah,
watch other people and you're like, well, why am I here? But they're thinking that about you too, right? It's such an awesome community. And
yeah,
there's also just no expectation. Like I love going live, but sometimes I just don't. Sometimes I'm just like,
yeah,
I can't deal with it right now. And I need to focus. If I'm having a real bad time with an accent, I'm like, I gotta go because everyone's watching me. And I'm like, I'm supposed to be all good at accents. And here's this Minnesota one that I am just failing at. I need to leave. Like
yeah,
you set your own boundaries on the clock app, on any social media for that matter. So if you're not
yeah.
comfortable, don't do it. Like PJ's not particularly comfortable, even though he's been on stage his whole life, but he's like,
Mm,
I redo things 17 times and nobody
mm,
wants to sit through that. I'm like, well, some people do, but if you don't
yeah.
want to go live, don't go live.
Yeah, I think that's such an important thing, and I think sometimes we can forget that, because we sort of feel like, oh, people are liking it, I must perform more, I must,
Right.
So I think that's really important. When you do, your normal videos, when they're not like the pre-recorded videos, because they bring, the great advice, comfort, knowledge, humor, entertainment, education, everything to so many people. And do you plan out your content, your content ideas, etc., like in advance? Do you just sort of wake up, this has happened to me, I'm going to talk about this today? Like, how kind of rigid is your social media plan?
Not rigid at
Uh,
all. Like I don't have time for that. Actually, I'm like sometimes I will reach like a dead zone where I'm like, I don't really have anything to talk about. Like
mm,
when stuff's going down, when like the AI thing was big, or I can only talk about the ACX contract so many times.
yeah,
Now I'm like, well, now what do I do? And that's where I'm like, maybe I'm just going to go to this live that I did because, they record them. So you can download the replay. And
Mm.
so you can pull clips from the replay. And sometimes I'll just post those.
Mm.
Or, sometimes it's just random. Sometimes it has nothing to do with narration because the other cool thing about social media is they're getting to know you as a person.
Mm.
So sometimes it's just my cats. Sometimes it's me yelling at a bulldozer in the next door neighbor's yard. But no, I don't have it planned out. I'm not that person
Yeah.
with like 300 drafts of things to talk about. Occasionally something will come up and I'm like, okay, I'm going to write that down, do research and talk about it because that is a huge thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
I want to make sure what I am saying is accurate. I don't like these kind of rage farming takes
Mm-hmm.
that I see that are just designed to get views and engagement and may or may not be based in fact or only have partial information. Like I want all of the information. If I don't have it, then I'm very, very I try to be
Yeah.
very cognizant about saying I don't have all the information.
Yeah.
But mostly like my platform is mostly about like information um because that's tends to be what I excel in is like research and that kind of stuff. But other people have bloopers and like I get so flustered when I make a mistake that I don't keep the bloopers. I immediately record over them. So I'm just like,
Yeah.
well, so people are like, I want bloopers. I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. I don't keep them. I just keep going. I got a job to
Yeah.
do. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I'm just
Yeah.
not creative to come up with stories and I don't have the patience to do like the pretty video editing. So I'm like, what you see is me in a booth. Occasionally I've showered. Like, yeah. So
Yeah. Well,
I
people
think you
love
just have to
them.
be yourself on social media. And it's kind of, and first find out what you
Yeah.
like to talk about.
Yeah. Like I get a lot of questions again to ask people, to ask our guests on this show about like kind of how important is it to get yourself out there as a narrator, especially in those early days where you're trying to get work, you're trying to get that experience, you're trying to get the the hours in the booth. Like how important do you feel getting on something like TikTok, at least putting some content out there? Like, because I think that's pretty vital in this day and age, right?
Right. The industry is so saturated right now that when you see those 200 to 400 auditions pop up on ACX, everybody is
Mm.
going for those. So what is it? Yes, you can differ yourself absolutely by your audition. Um, but the nice thing about establishing a presence on social media is kind of what I said earlier. They're getting to know you. They're
Mm.
getting to know whether or not they want to work with you. And it's very different than kind of how it has been in the past, I assuming, because, I've only been doing this for like 2 years, little
Mm.
less. So like people being like, oh, don't worry, don't talk to your author about that. Don't do that. I'm like, well, if that works for you, great. But I am very much about
Mm.
collaborating with my authors. And I have friendships, like I have many of them on text, and we don't necessarily talk about just the audiobook. Like
Mm.
now they're friends. Um, and that started before I necessarily was getting their contract.
Mm.
And I'm friends with people who I may never get their contract because they have a different narrator, but that's okay because they might recommend me for something else.
Mm.
And also, it's just a friendship, which is really, really nice. But I definitely think establishing yourself, and I have heard that some of the bigger publishers are looking to see what your presence looks like. Um, but I will also say this, don't worry about the view count or how many followers you have. The engagement is what matters more. Like your like follower to engagement ratio is
Mm.
more important than the number of people who see the video because just because you have a video that goes viral and hits what, I don't know, 25,000 views, it may be by people who will never have anything to do with you again.
Mm.
But if you constantly have people who are fans, who are friends interacting, they are more likely who you're going to work with anyway.
Mm. Yeah, I think
So
that's
I
such a
think
good
we get
point.
bogged down on the numbers versus, and yeah, views are not the same thing as engagement, and
Yeah.
the engagement is more important.
Yeah. So to get that engagement up, then is that where the making sure that you are authentic, making sure that you are responsive, and are your real self? Is that where that sort of comes in?
I
I
think so. I
phrased
mean,
that really weird. So,
I'm not a marketing expert like at
yeah.
all. I'm just telling you like this is my experience. And
Yeah.
also, you can't just throw stuff up there and go away. If
Mm-hmm.
you want to be a member of a community, then you need to be a member of the community.
Mm-hmm.
You know, go and interact with your other narrator friends, go and interact with authors with the expectation of nothing, that you will get nothing out of it, but actually engage with people so that you become a personality that people kind of gravitate and want to talk to. Again, it may come to nothing financial, but it might.
Yeah.
And then also you've established amazing relationships along the
Yeah.
way. So
Oh, absolutely. I resonate with that so much. I think, like, because the biggest thing that I have for, you know, the engaging in the community, that it just catapulted my enjoyment of this craft. Is getting to know other narrators and authors just as friends, you know, just getting more friends and things. It's just amazing. And then you go to something like APAC and you actually get to meet them and hang out for like the first time and stuff. It's just, yeah, I think it's just amazing just for that, you know.
yeah, you have inherent interests already like that are the same. You already have a ton of stuff to talk about. So now it's just a question of meeting them and talking about it with them.
Yeah.
And yeah, the business part, very important, not knocking it, but not the be all and end all, and not necessarily the purpose for having social media.
Yeah.
It's a building block, but there's other things too. Like you still need to do your training and you still need to know how to work everything. Like it's not just about engaging. It's not just about interfacing. That's just part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. What is a typical working day in the life for you? Would you mind just walking us through what a typical day in the office looks like?
Recently, because it changes. Recently, the past couple weeks, it's been getting up at 5 a.m. I have my coffee maker programmed to start brewing at 4:50. So it's ready when I come downstairs. I grab a protein bar, my first cup of coffee, and I go into the front room because my boys, the boy cats, are inevitably yowling about being in the front room all night, which has to happen because the other cat will not. She's a drama queen. Anyway, we wouldn't sleep if they were out. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay.
So I go in and I spend about 15 minutes, 20 minutes playing with them and also kind of warming up, talking to them, lip trills, etc. And I come back in here and I narrate probably until about 8. So usually starting around 5:30, 5:45, and I narrate till about 8. And that's kind of when like the morning rush starts. And also when my stomach starts growling, and it's usually the time when I have to let out the boys so that they can eat, etc. From there, it completely varies. It really does depend on my neighborhood because I live in the city and really loud bass and revving cars are a thing around here. Today was great. Today and yesterday were great. I got a lot done. I came back in at like 10:30 and narrated for another couple hours. And yesterday I got an hour and 40 minutes of recorded audio. Today I got a little over 2 hours.
Nice.
If I can't, then I'm usually prepping a book. Like yesterday, I spent the afternoon prepping the book, a new book, I should say. Or, I'll play Diablo for a little bit, do a
Yeah.
workout occasionally in there. Just kind of, I definitely have to listen to my surroundings before. So it's not typical, unfortunately. I wish it was because people are always like, I always miss your lives. And I'm like, well, they aren't scheduled. So
Yeah.
yeah.
How is it like how is narrating that early in the morning for you? Like, did you, because it always takes me like a couple hours to like come round and my voice to sort of get to a point where it, like, is consistent even with some like warm-ups and stuff. I'm sort of usually groggy and coughing for the first for the first hour of the day and stuff. Like, is that like, are you comfortable narrating that early in the morning, even once you've done your warm-ups and everything like that?
Once I started getting enough sleep beforehand, because there was a time back in February where I was having to get up at that time, but I wasn't going to bed till like 11, or because I was doing something else that required I be up that early. So then my voice was scratchy for a really long time, like an hour, hour and a half after I would get up. But now, like, it's pretty good. It's a little lower. And so oftentimes I might start off honestly with an audition and then go into the book.
Yeah.
But the book I was narrating now, I mean, she talks down here anyway. So talking down here first thing in the morning is no problem.
Yeah.
It's actually harder later in the day because then my voice starts to pitch up and get a little less of that rasp.
Yeah.
So
I get that. The first thing, if the first thing I'll try and record is like some sort of romance audition where it's like a deep gravelly guy.
yes.
Like, yeah.
Yes. Or do I have a villain? Because I have my like manly morning kind of thing. Like now is the perfect time to narrate the guy if it's like a duel or something. I'm like, all right, let's do his lines right now.
You do like if it's an audition, you're like, if I get this book, I'm gonna just have to do it in 15-minute bursts at the start of every day.
Or like maybe in the space of the audition, they'll hear your voice change and just rise a little bit. But
Yeah, yeah,
it's
it
harder for me
evolves.
to do like a high-pitched, bubbly person first thing in the morning. And I know it's hard to tell, but like you would never guess, but I don't get cast in that often.
Fair
So
enough. What's the best place for people to keep up with you and make sure that they're following everything you're getting up to?
probably TikTok.
Hmm.
Yeah. And if they get rid of that, because that's always rumored, I am on Instagram. I
Hmm.
have a website. I'll be around.
Yeah, yeah, that's fair. And I'm sure that's the thing, isn't it? Because like social media, I don't know, it seems sort of in the because you have the thing with TikTok and then Twitter. I have no clue what Twitter's doing right now.
Oh,
Is
I
that they
don't even
always
touch Twitter.
yeah, it's well, to be honest, is that my engagements just dropped because obviously they had that verified thing where you pay the monthly subscription and then they that sort of boosts the posts. And because I don't really
Oh,
want to do that, like my engagement's like halved. It's very annoying after you've spent so much time trying to build something up.
yeah.
You know?
Yeah. No, that grosses me out. I mean, that's
Yeah,
the issue with TikTok too, is it's like it doesn't matter. It
yeah,
doesn't matter how many followers you have. They decide that they're not pushing your video out. There's nothing you
mm,
can do about it because
yeah,
they'll come back and be like, "Oh no, you can't promo that. Why not? Because we said so." Oh, okay.
mm,
So it is what it is, and that's I think why they talk about posting more than once per day and just that kind of thing. And I will take my TikTok reels and just put them over on Instagram and then on Facebook, and I'm like, "Cool, I'm done."
yeah,
But yeah, I don't touch Twitter with like a
yeah,
10-foot pole. I'm like, nope,
yeah.
nope.
I don't blame you.
No,
I
and
think
it's already so much to keep up with that having to
yeah,
do like 4 or 5, I'm like, no,
yeah.
no.
Yeah, I think it's better to do like a few well and consistent than have like every single platform possible and then post like once a month.
Agreed.
Yeah. So
Agreed.
I'd love to end the show by simply asking if you have any upcoming projects, upcoming things that you're excited about that we can look forward to.
Ooh, I have so many. How do I narrow it down? So I'm multi-genre, right? Like, people are
Mhm.
like, oh, I love romance. That's all I want to do. Props to them. That's not all I want to do. I want to do everything, right?
Yeah.
So I've been on kind of like a romance bender for a little bit, but next week I get to narrate a horror novella
Oh,
with
nice.
demons, and I'm so excited. And then
Yeah.
after that, I have a Christian historical romance. And then, you know, it is what it is. But then after that, I have a vampire paranormal romance. And then after that, I have a psychological horror. So I'm super excited that I'm getting to like I'll mix it up. Like I get bored narrating the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
Not to say that all romance is the same, but the same genre, the same
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
happily ever after. I'm like, no, sometimes I want a demon and I want like no romance involved. Like summon the demon, destroy the demon, please. Or don't. Who know? I mean, yeah, I like to mix it up.
Oh, definitely. I'm so with you on that one. I don't do non-fictions that much anymore, but I went through a weird, I don't know what happened last year, but I ended up doing sort of about 50-50 non-fiction.
Oh, nice.
And yeah, and I felt like, oh, this is great. I'm going to learn so much. I'm going to be like the smartest guy who's ever existed. And then I just forgot everything. As soon as it went just
I
out.
did a 15-hour, it was like holistic cancer treatments book. And
Okay.
I was like, oh, I actually used to write grants for cancer at like a medical school. Like, I'm good. I'm so cool. Oh my gosh. I joked it was a hazing ritual. It was the amount of like pronunciations and things that I had to look up. And then, oh my gosh, you were talking earlier about my pickups and how I
Yeah.
have none. No, I had almost like 300 for this book
The fairs. That's
because
fairs.
I said curcumin and it was supposed to be curcumin, and that word shows up in that book. I like 75 times and I said them wrong. And I looked it up and I think I wrote it down wrong because I did look it up. I had it written in like in my script. Oh my gosh. And I was like, okay, so nonfiction's really hard. It's really hard. I don't know that I like nonfiction, but no, it was a fun learning experience, even if I was like afterwards, just completely brain dead. I think I
Yeah.
took like a week off afterwards. I was like, whew, that was that was a lot. I'll I'll take some romance right now. You can bring it back.
Well, that's
So
it. I think like because I used because I was doing like romance nonfiction. It got like so confuddled and stuff. I was reading like an interview extract in a nonfiction, and then like just like subliminally going like, when are they gonna kiss? When are they gonna like start? Like,
yeah.
when...
Or you say it and you're like, that curcumin. Nope. Nope. Wrong,
yeah,
wrong.
yeah, you do it seductively.
Yes, exactly. I mean, hey, maybe more people will listen to holistic cancer treatments if that's how you do it, right?
Maybe so. I think it's worth the worth the experiment.
But it was fun. It was fun to learn about the different herbs and like what they
Yeah.
could do. Like even cancer treatment aside, just the
Mm.
science behind the chemicals and stuff in it. But yes, note pro tip to everybody, just because you used to write cancer grants doesn't mean you can say all the chemicals. And yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I did a book just at the start of the year. It was no, it wasn't. It was the end of last year. It was just before Christmas, on Lyme's disease, and I was prepped right, and I had big family dinner and stuff all ready for Christmas, and then I had all these facts about the disease in my head, and I was telling everybody around it, and I thought, oh, this isn't fun for them. Like,
I
just
would have found it fascinating, but I was doing the same thing with the cancer book. I was like, come out and be like, did you know that reishi mushrooms do this thing?
yeah,
Fascinating. You become an expert for like the duration of the book, and then afterwards you're like, I have no idea what
yeah.
I read about reishi mushrooms. I just remember there were reishi mushrooms.
Yeah, it's like I'm running around Tesco. That's our local supermarket. Running around our local supermarket trying to find turmeric, and then going like, "Well, I need it. It's great for everything."
It's
So,
great for everything. It is because it has the compound curcumin in it, by the way, and it's an
is it?
anti-inflammatory.
Oh, well, there you go.
See, I do remember some things.
That's great.
But yeah, mixing that up with the romance and the horror and yeah. Oh, and then I'm going to a couple more book festivals, which will
Oh,
be
cool.
fun. So
Cool. Do you get to like meet? Do you go with authors? Do you get to meet like the listeners and things? Like, how does that? How do those events kind of work?
yeah, it's an excellent question. I've only gone as a guest before, like as like a reader, like attendee, but they
Yeah,
are
yeah.
great for networking. I went to Imaginarium in May and like met some really cool people, bought a lot of books. And some people I may end up working for, and if not, I have a lot of cool books.
Yeah.
And then so again in July, we're kind of going as like attendees to meet authors, etc. And then the one in September, I'm still waiting to hear back on whether or not we get a table,
Hmm.
which would be, and then we're like, oh shoot, what am I going to sell? Like, because that was something else that was coming up with like, because now they're inviting more and more narrators, but it's like, what do we bring?
Yeah.
Because like authors, you can sell books. Like, I can't sell you the audiobook because it's probably exclusive on Audible.
Yeah.
Or something like that. Like it's not my property to sell. So the
Yeah.
discussion becomes like, what can we, I mean, stickers, right? Stickers, pens,
Yeah.
bookmarks, but
Merch. Yeah.
what else? So we're talking to one of my, if we get the table, I'm going to contact one of my authors who I've narrated a lot for and be like, hey, can you send me some of your books? And like, I will sell them at the table, but maybe with the audiobook promo code inside for like maybe a
Yeah.
random 5 people, or maybe
Yeah.
do some kind of bundled giveaway of audiobooks where I do actually buy them the books.
Yeah.
But if they enter my raffle for like $5 or something like that, then you have a chance to win this bundle of however many.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting, so I have no idea what to expect. I know that, I think Readers Take Denver and Love in Vegas have like a narrator's alley, but
Mm.
I'm not the Bordeaux.
Yeah.
Like,
Is that?
so like I don't think anybody would be signing up to be like, oh, we need Paige Reisenfeld's signature. Someday, maybe, I hope. But yeah, I'm not, Teddy
Yeah.
Hamilton. I'm not Lessa Lamb.
Do you know? I was just gonna say. It's so funny you mentioned Teddy. I had so Teddy was the episode that came out for the listeners came out last week.
Oh,
For you and I, the episode that comes out on Friday. I was talking to Teddy Hamilton. He mentioned going to all of these events. And the one in Vegas in October. I think is that the Love in Vegas one.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, and like he was saying, oh, you should come. You should come and like hang out and meet people and stuff. And it's like, well, it's okay for you with your 10,000 Legion strong army of fans
Right.
who actually want to talk to you and like actually like want to spend time. I was like, I don't know what I would do. Like, I would just have to spend the entire time explaining like who I was and why I was there to the security guards probably to let me in.
Right, right. Or like I'd be like at the corner, like, hey, I
Yeah.
give it to you. Yeah, I just feel like it'd be awkward. I don't know. But then we're looking at ones next year where we might actually do a panel. Like I'm talking to coordinators about actually doing a panel at some of
Yeah.
these things about either the audiobook process, or one of the ones we're talking about is specifically talking about like dual and duet.
Yeah.
Because it's a romance convention, so it kind of makes sense, right? Like
Oh,
that
that's a
seems to
great
be
idea.
the prevalency of that. because it's for the authors and for the listeners, but
Mm,
imparting information for people who aren't on social media. So that's another way to kind of go. And even if you
yeah.
aren't signing things, you're still contributing to the community.
Yeah, do like a little live reading, Q&A, little presentation sort of thing.
Yeah.
I think that'd
And
be great fun.
you could tailor it too for whatever the convention is. Like, is it sci-fi and fantasy? You can talk about, I don't know, I'll come up with something, but like coming up with like alien voices and that kind of
Yeah,
stuff, when they're described as having weird, fluty whistling tones, like how do
yeah,
you do that? Like in Project Hail Mary, when they were talking about how the spider alien speaks in musical tones
yeah,
and how they did that for the audiobook to
yeah,
translate it, but still add like that kind of cool stuff.
yeah.
Or yeah, horror, like how do you I don't know, the differences between narrating horror and romance. There's not really many. It's, but yeah, like pacing and that kind of thing, how like you need to slow things down because that's what builds that tension, like versus being
Yeah,
fast for an action scene. Like you could completely tailor these panels, these Q&As for where you are.
yeah.
And I say all this like I've done it and I have not done any of it yet. So
It's
it
a
could be a
great
complete
idea.
failure.
No, it's a great idea. I think they're missing a trick by not doing it now. You've just said that. I'm sold. I'm,
Hey.
I'll be on the front row.
Excellent, excellent. We'll zoom you in and be
Oh
like,
yeah.
John gets this seat right here. He said so.
Put me on a little iPad on the front thing. Yeah, that's
Yes.
me.
We'll have you up there. I'll just bring like my phone and be like, he's right here. He has things to contribute.
Oh, I don't know about that. I'm just nodding enthusiastically. I agree
That's
with
fine.
everything.
We love enthusiastic agreement.
Good, because that's all I bring to the table most times. I think.
That's not true. You narrate books. I know you narrated an American accent while Ali Shay did a British one. Did I hear that right?
That is true. Yeah, I felt so bad because I was responsible for sort of throwing that on her, and I felt very so because I said, okay, there was a character who's English and the character who's American, just assuming it would be me who's English and Ali who was American, and then finding out pretty much right at the last minute that it was actually switched, and then it was like, oh yeah, by the way, you have to narrate this full book in so I felt bad, but Ali smashed it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, she's
As you would expect, from Ali, because they're absolutely great. But yeah, that whole experience, albeit very funny and a nice little tale to tell, was so enjoyable. And working with Ali and developing that little friendship that we have, it started off from that, and then they came on the show, and then we met at APAC and stuff. It was just amazing.
yeah. Yeah. And so now you have a story to tell about a dual or duet romance book. See, you can contribute.
Yeah.
And why this stuff is important and why we need to ask authors exactly what they want.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. I so really do appreciate it. It's been an absolute blast. This has flown by for me. I hope I hope it hasn't slugged for you.
Oh
Um,
no, it's been so much fun. And again, I talk too much, so I appreciate you like no. Like Paige, you're rambling. Shh.
No, not at all. Not at all. Well, that just about brings us to a close for this episode of the Audiobook Club. All of the links to Paige's social media and recent projects will be linked in the show notes. Thank you so much for tuning in. And of course, another huge, huge thank you to you, Paige, for joining us. Thank you so much.
No, thank you for having me.
Frustrated by the royalty rates for your audiobook? Annoyed that when the digital distributors say 70% royalties, they actually mean 70% of 50% or 80% of 70%, neither of which is an actual 70%. Wishing there was a way to cut out the middleman? Yet, you want your audiobook listeners to have a smooth and positive experience, and a direct download sale from your website won't deliver that. We at Pro Audio Voices hear you. Out of our commitment to our author clients, we've created Amplify, a program that provides an actual 65% of the sales price that you set, that gives you access to your customers' names and emails so you can reconnect with them, and keeps you in the driver's seat. Check it out at proaudiovoices.com. You'll find Amplify in the marketing menu.